up in the morning and think, where am I going to get my next drink of water? We don't even think about it. It's there. It'll be there for us. It's always been there. But everything else looks for water. And if you're the only water in town, they're going to try their best to get into it. They'll smell water. That's their job. That's how mosquitoes have been around so long. And if they've got an avenue in, they will find it. And I actually had one company that I went to one time, and they had this device. I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Well, it's mosquito aider," or whatever they call it. And I said, "Well, what does that do? Does it keep the mosquitoes out of the tank?" And they go, "Oh no, it keeps the mosquitoes in the tank." And I thought, wait a minute, this is backwards. I want to keep the mosquitoes out of my tank, and these filters will do that. So that's the 4-step process that they came up with. It's very low maintenance, and if you forget to maintain any portion of this system, the only real thing that you have to maintain is a filter element in here, and if you forget to maintain it, it will not stop up. You just don't collect quite as much water as you might otherwise have done. So they actually left one in the ground for, excuse me, I'm going to have to turn this. They actually left one in the ground for 3 years. Came back and the filter was really dirty, but when they tested it at the factory, it was still collecting 70% of the water that it would have. So I tell people to clean like twice a year. I don't clean mine that often, but because once your tank is full, you aren't going to collect any water anyway. It doesn't matter. Excuse me, I've been talking all day. This is just an example of the pre-filter. I've got some at my booth. There are other designs. This just happens to be the one I have a picture of. But the water comes in the top, goes through this filter. The discharged water goes out to the cistern. The other water takes the debris and the water that you do not collect out with it. You do have some loss, but in rainwater collection there is no free lunch. You lose water everywhere. Even first flush devices. I don't call them first flush filters because they never filter. There's not a filtration device in a first flush device. It's only a diverter that tries to guess how much and when the material coming off the roof will arrive in a volume sort of way. I don't like the assumptions you have to make to use those types of devices. I know a lot of people use them, but I consider them to be high maintenance and of some value, better than nothing. But nevertheless, I would prefer to have all my water filtered. I was doing a little study one time about the difference in how much water you lost with a first flush device versus one of these. And I got down that over the course of the year it'd be pretty even because you have to drain the first flush devices. And then I realized that first flush devices never filter, and you're back to the cleaning your tank out every 3, 5, or 7 years. It doesn't matter to me how often you have to clean your tank. I don't want to ever have to do it. And with the German methodology, the term never is used to mean the service life of the tank. So as long as you're going to be using that tank, they don't ever need to get into cleaning.
Do your first flush devices help your filtering?
Well, the question was, do the first flush devices help the filtering? The problem with the first flush devices is, like I said, is the assumptions you have to make. Where the water comes from your roof, how many gallons hit before it washes the dirt off, how much dirt is actually moved from the roof, when the leaves fall on the roof. Like if your first flush diverter is full of water and then the wind blows, which it does when it rains, and you get additional leaves on your roof, which it does when it rains, then you can end up with leaves that just go right into your tank and you have the same problem. You've helped a little bit. As far as filtering, the first flush device doesn't filter, so it doesn't necessarily really help with the filtering because the pre-filters take care of that type of material. Now, the first flush device has the possibility of removing smaller particles than this pre-filter can remove. But I've never really been able to convince myself that I would know when those particles are going to come in the rain stream. It would depend upon how hard it was raining, because you could have a very soft rain that wouldn't move the material off the roof, wouldn't move it down the gutter. You could have a very hard rain where maybe the first flush device would fill up from the nearest one and not fill up from the furthest ones. As far as technological process, they work better than doing absolutely nothing, but they're not where we need to be, in my opinion, to make this whole system go Main Street. This is an example of one that would fit on just a downspout and the main housing, and it's a little hard to tell, but basically everything that comes out has been filtered. Let's see if I can pull up a comment here. Sorry, just a second. I think that, and these are just the types of floating filters that are available. They've got small sizes, coarse filters. I actually use one of these in my creek to draw water out to water my garden because it's more robust than the fine filters. And you really, even the floating filters aren't really a filter because the particles in the tank will be smaller than the size of the screen on the filter itself, but because they float to get purer water, they operate like a filter, but they aren't really designed to filter because you don't ever have to clean them as well. I've had one that's been in my tank for 5 years, and there's no accumulation on them. I guess they're really there in case something went terribly wrong. You wouldn't be pulling something into your system that you didn't want. Well, I'm through a little bit early, and it's probably a good thing because I'm not sure my voice can stand much more. I've been talking nonstop, and I was a little bit ill last week. Do we have any questions or comments? Anybody want to? Yes, sir.
I heard something. I don't know if it's Wiseville or something about Texas passed a law on the tax you on your rainwater collection system.
Okay. The question was, he's heard something, he doesn't know if it's a wives' tale or a law that Texas wanted to tax you on your rainwater system. I've heard nothing along those lines. That may have been a spin-off from people who have had to put meters on their wells. And it started out like where we wanted to meter the wells, and then everybody found out, well, now the state knows how much water I use. So they were thinking, well, what's the next step? And maybe the next step might be a groundwater tax. I don't know. But no, nothing about taxing rainwater. We are so tiny.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, there'd be no way to collect enough money to make it worth the administration. Really. There wouldn't be. You think anybody else? Yes, sir.
You show your in-ground water system
Yes.
tank.
Yes,
Does
sir.
it matter if it's in-ground or above ground? And what is your booth number?
Okay, what was the last thing?
Booth.
Oh, my booth number, I think it's 821. 821. Okay, this question was that my graphics showed the tank below ground. And does it matter? Well, we're talking about physical properties of water. As long as the water runs downhill, it doesn't matter. Because water will not run uphill on its own. Some places you have to do what you can to get it to work. This particular system is what we would call a dry system, which means that it will dry out between events, which is really the best, where you don't have water stored, because people will put weep holes in the wet part of the system, and weep holes can get stopped up. Or in one case, I saw a gentleman who didn't put a weep hole on his system. He put a ball valve faucet fitting, and he had it set so that when the water backed up, it developed so much pressure that he collected no rain at all, because it's the thing back, when it was very low, it would drip, 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 and then when it got 8 or 10 feet ahead on it, it would just spray the water out, and he didn't collect any water. So I'm not real fond of those types of things. Sometimes it's just what you have to do. I mean, if your house is perfectly level and you have a small lot and you can't go overhead with your water lines, sometimes you'll have to do a wet system. That's your question. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Sorry, in the back.
I talked to you first at your booth, and I've got some really good information. I've got 2 questions, and then I'll sit down. Can you just summarize the main differences between what the Germans are doing and what we're doing over here? And number 2, John Kite of Bernie is giving a talk on water systems. I don't know if you know him or not.
Oh yeah, he's president and I'm treasurer of the Texas Rainwater Catchment Systems
Tomorrow
Association.
at, I think, 1 o'clock, it's phenomenal what he's done.
Yeah,
I highly recommend that.
Yeah, John is, he's no offense, he's an engineer, so he's a retired engineer, so he is meticulous. I mean, you cannot fight him on his data. I mean, he developed his system for the drought of record, and and he's taken meticulous rain measurements and all of this.